Democrats won big on election night, with their party's candidates winning the ballot across several key races in New York City, New Jersey, and Virginia. And California voters approved a plan redrawing congressional districts in Democrats' favor. They have the takeaways from the key races. President Trump delivered remarks at a breakfast with Republican senators today. He urged lawmakers to end the filibuster. The president commented on yesterday's elections, the government shutdown, and other topics. The Supreme Court hears arguments today on the legality of President Trump's global tariffs, sweeping measures imposed under emergency powers. At least 9 people are dead after a cargo plane crashed near Louisville's Muhammad Ali International Airport. What officials are saying about the disaster as an investigation is launched.
This is NTD News Today, live from our global headquarters in New York City.
Today is Wednesday, November 5th. I'm Stephanie Cox. Democrats swept a trio of races in the first major election since President Trump regained the presidency. We take a look at the latest results. We've got the governor's race in Virginia here with 96% of the votes in. Democrat Abigail Spanberger winning 57.2% of the vote. Winsome Earl Sears trailing behind. Ghazala Hashmi with the lieutenant governor's race winning 55.3% in Virginia. And we also had another major race in Virginia, the attorney general's race, where Jay Jones came in with 52.8%, also with 96% of the votes in. And over in New Jersey, the governor's race took a similar tack. We have Mikey Sherrill winning 56.2% of the vote, Jack Ciattarelli trailing with 43.2%. And over in New York City, the mayor's race, Zohran Mamdani, the Democratic candidate, winning with 50.4%. Andrew Cuomo running in as an independent, and Curtis Sliwa as the Republican candidate with just 7% there. And just over half of voters, as you saw, chose Zohran Mamdani in a historic election that saw the highest turnout in 50 years, with more than 2 million New Yorkers casting their ballots. After winning the New York City mayoral race, Zohran Mamdani said he will announce members of his new administration soon. Here's more from his press conference today in Queens.
Last night, we made history. I'm so proud to be standing here today as the mayor-elect of the greatest city in the world. Over 2 million New Yorkers cast their ballots. Whether they were the more than million who supported this campaign or the others who supported someone else, or whether they felt too disappointed by the political process to participate at all, I will work every day to honor the trust that I now hold.
Mamdani said over the coming days, he will announce roles including deputy mayors and commissioners. They will carry out the critical work of city agencies and oversee entire areas of government. Mamdani also announced 5 women who will serve on his transition team. They include his campaign advisor, who will be the executive director. The transition team members have worked under the previous 3 mayors. Mamdani promised to build an administration that is capable, compassionate, driven by integrity, and willing to work hard. He said he's willing to work with Mayor Eric Adams to ensure a smooth transition. And a number of Jewish organizations are reacting to the election of Zohran Mamdani as the next mayor of New York City. The UJA Federation of New York issued a statement expressing its concerns. The federation said, quote, "We recognize that voters are animated by a range of issues, but we cannot ignore that the mayor-elect holds core beliefs fundamentally at odds with our community's deepest convictions and most cherished values." The coalition said it would continue to work to ensure the city's Jewish community and all communities feel safe and respected. The organization added, quote, "Our agenda remains clear. We will hold all elected officials, including Mayor-elect Mamdani, fully accountable for ensuring that New York remains a place where Jewish life and support for Israel are protected and can thrive." In his victory speech last night, Mamdani appeared to respond to concerns within the Jewish community, saying, quote, "We will build a city hall that stands steadfast alongside Jewish New Yorkers and does not waver in the fight against the scourge of anti-Semitism." Next, California voters approved a plan yesterday to redraw the state's congressional map in Democrats' favor. And you can see there they voted 63.8% to 36.2%. And that's for Prop 50. That will have a wide-ranging effect for the nation as we see the midterms coming up next year. Governor Gavin Newsom celebrated the news.
But what a night for the Democratic Party. A party that is in its ascendancy, a party that's on its toes, no longer on its heels, from coast to coast, sea to shining sea. But it was not just a victory tonight for the Democratic Party, it was a victory for the United States of America, for the people of this country.
The approval of Proposition 50 gives Democrats a shot at winning as many as 5 additional House seats. That's just enough to blunt Texas Republicans' move to redraw their own maps to pick up 5 GOP seats. The measure was spearheaded by Newsom. Former President Barack Obama urged voters to pass it as well. Congressional district boundaries are typically redrawn every 10 years to reflect population shifts documented in the census. Mid-decade redistricting is unusual, except when a court order finds fault with the maps that are in place. Following the results, Californian Republicans vowed the fight is not over.
This fight is not over. It's just started. But that's going to leave this conversation wide open for Republicans to come in and not only remind people of the problems that California is dealing with, the crime, the Prop 36 still going unfunded, even though the voters voted for it, kitchen table issues, the homeless problem that Gavin Newsom promised to solve when he was mayor of San Francisco that still hasn't been solved. We're going to be pointing all of those issues out, and we're going to be taking our message directly to the people of California.
President Trump delivered remarks today at a breakfast with Republican senators. The president commented on yesterday's elections, the government shutdown, and other topics.
And last night, it was, not expected to be a victory. It was very Democrat areas, but I don't think it was good for Republicans. I don't think it was good. I'm not sure it was good for anybody. But we had an interesting evening, and we learned a lot, and we're going to talk about that. But I thought we'd have a discussion after the press leaves about what last night represented and what we should do about it, and also about the shutdown and how that relates to last night. I think if you read the pollsters, the shutdown was a big factor, negative for the Republicans, and that was a big factor.
Trump said he didn't feel Democrats are really getting the blame for what he called the disastrous Democrat-created government shutdown, now officially the longest in American history.
It's time for Republicans to do what they have to do, and that's terminate the filibuster. It's the only way you can do it. And if you don't terminate the filibuster, you'll be in bad shape. We won't pass any legislation. There'll be no legislation passed for 3.25. We have 3.25 years, so that's a long time. If I thought that they weren't going to pass the filibuster, I wouldn't even bring it up. They're going to pass it within the first hour. If they take power, and it's more likely that they take power if we don't do it, because we're not going to be passing any legislation. They're not going to approve anything. We're going to go 3.25 years. There won't be one bill that we're going to pass, because the easiest thing to pass is exactly right now what they won't pass. And they'll do that, and they'll wreak havoc. But let's assume they get in. They're doing it anyway, so it wouldn't matter. They're doing it anyway.
Trump also criticized mail-in voting, calling it prone to corruption, and he took issue with blue slip rules that let senators block his U.S. attorney nominations. Trump said his administration's tax cuts and job growth prove Republicans can deliver results if they can move legislation without obstruction. The president also recalled an incident from his meeting with Chinese regime leader Xi Jinping in South Korea last week.
So he's here, and he's got about 6 people on each side, and every one of those people was standing like this. They were at attention. And I made a comment to one of them, and I got no response. I said, "Are you going to answer me?" I got no response. And President Xi didn't let him have any. So If there's any question, I said, I want my cabinet to behave like that. That's the way. I'm demanding that I want them sitting up like that, Tim, just nice and straight. I never saw posture like that. I've never seen men so scared in their lives. They have the equivalent of a vice president. He was. I said, "Are you going to answer my question?" And he's like, he doesn't move. I said, "What's wrong with this guy?" "I will answer all questions."
Trump was explaining how he tried talking to Chinese officials while they stood next to Xi Jinping and got no response. He made the room laugh, as you just heard, by saying next that Vice President J.D. Vance does not behave like that and budges into conversations. All right, President Trump is set to speak at the America Business Forum in Miami today. The event is drawing some influential speakers for 2 days of talks on global growth. Trump will deliver remarks at 1 p.m. at Miami's Kaseya Center and then return to Washington later in the day. Other speakers on the forum's agenda include Amazon founder Jeff Bezos, JP Morgan CEO Jamie Dimon, and former Google executive Eric Schmidt. The program also lists soccer star Lionel Messi and tennis champion Serena Williams. Argentine President Javier Milei and Nobel Peace Prize winner Maria Corina Machado are also on the program, possibly appearing virtually, though. The major elections held yesterday included gubernatorial races in Virginia and New Jersey, New York City's mayoral election, and significant ballot initiatives, such as California's Proposition 50. Democrats emerged as the winners in all the major contests, sweeping key races and strengthening their position ahead of the 2026 midterms. Joining us now to discuss is legal analyst and civil rights attorney Bobby Ann Cox and NTD News contributor and the host of the Can We Please Talk podcast, Mike Leon. Good to have you both with us today. Let's start with a look at the Democratic Party itself and where it's at today. Yesterday's elections, of course, were by and large in Democratic strongholds, so those wins were expected, especially in an off year. Yet, looking at Zohran Mamdani specifically in his campaign, it kind of struck a different tone to the moderate messaging of recent years for that party. Starting off with you, Mike, what, if anything, does his campaign and win indicate about the Democratic Party today?
Well, good to see you ladies on this Wednesday afternoon. Well, I think it says a couple of things. First, my hope is that Democrats copy the blueprint of what he did. The march from Fort Tryon all the way down to Lower Manhattan, knocking on doors, doing things that a typical candidate, you would see them do at a local race, right? Like they'd be standing outside of the grocery store and handing out flyers. He did all of this grassroots campaigning, and Democrats have been dying to have somebody energize the party like that. And then here comes this person, and they're like, well, not that way, which is so funny to see with the endorsements, the tepid endorsements from the likes of Hakeem Jeffries and Chuck Schumer. So what does it say about the party overall? I'll echo something that Congressman Seth Moulton, who's a friend of mine who's been on my show and now running for Senate in Massachusetts, said, which is that it's a mixed bag, right? You get the Abigail Spanbergers, who are moderate Democrats that can win a gubernatorial race. You get the Mikey Sherrills, who served in this nation's, army. And then you get the Zohran Mamdanis, who are Democratic socialists that have some ideas that some think maybe are crazy, maybe they're far-fetched, but, it's a shot in the dark and it's a try, but he can mobilize voters and energize the base. And it's a mixed bag. And that's what I think was the takeaway last night, the through line in terms of the 2025 elections for Democrats.
And strategists, of course, are really starting to unpick what unfolded last night, starting to reflect on Mamdani's win, asking what's causing people to choose a socialist platform. Bobby Ann, your thoughts on that?
Well, I think that the voters in New York City that turned out in large numbers are a mixed bag, as Mike said. But here's what the problem is. I think the messaging was that, hey, I'm going to improve New York City by making everything more, quote unquote, affordable. So what Mamdani has been saying on his campaign trail is he's going to make it more affordable, which is something that's very enticing to many New Yorkers, right? But how is he going to do that? He's not going to do that by lowering taxes and putting more money in your pocket. He has been very open about how he's going to do that. For example, providing free buses, which is something he cannot do, by the way. The MTA controls the bus system in New York City, And that is controlled by the New York State legislature, not by the not by the mayor of New York City. He says he's going to give free childcare. He's going to freeze the rent so that landlords can't increase rent. He's going to ban private property so that you don't own anything. He's going to seize the means of production. These are all things that are really beyond socialism. They really are more Marxist in nature. So people were not really paying attention to the details, but they liked the overall idea that he has been promoting, which is, more affordable. And I think that's why he won.
And affordability was a key issue across many of the elections yesterday, but strategists are also kind of asking, why is it that young people did not mind this label of socialism and even want to vote for it? We'll start with you, Mike.
Yeah, well, I'll piggyback on something Bobby Ann said. So first off, there's a couple things. And you know this, Steph. I'm a lifelong New York kid. I grew up 20 blocks away from Bronx Science High School, where Zohran went to high school. So New York City runs through my blood. But I don't live in New York anymore, right? I haven't for the last 2 years. Why? Because the apartment I lived in during the COVID pandemic, when New York was trying to get people back in under de Blasio with the rent freezes and the 15 to 18-month leases, that unit is now $2,500 more. For a family of four, it's completely unaffordable. No mayor is going to change that. Not Zohran Mamdani, not Andrew Cuomo, not Curtis Siwa, not Jesus Christ. No mayor is going to do that because we live in a capitalistic society and we're not going to get landlords to stop charging those type of rent prices like we did see during the pandemic when they were trying to get people back in. So that's number one. Number two, the reason why young voters are going to the socialist is because of something that Bobby said there in terms of the pie in the sky type stuff. But I would take umbrage with the word that she used, which is seize. It's not really about seize. There's a difference between socialism and communism and Marxism, and these terms get conflated. And as the son of a kid who left a communist country, I know what communism looks like when the government controls everything. Socialism, is not the exact same way. And so people are looking for a different type of change. They're looking for people to talk to them about the issues, not necessarily solve them. And we saw that in the 2024 elections, which is what's happening right now in 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue, which is the affordability crisis is still playing out in different cities. So I think for Democrats, the takeaway is keep talking about the issue, right? Maybe not solve it, but as long as you keep talking about it, because voters are creatures of the current moment, you will garner those votes. And that's what we saw in 2024 with Trump's rise. That's what we're seeing in 2025 play out as well.
And as we look at the messaging and the successes and failures of the different approaches, I know, Bobby Ann, you fought Governor Hochul's move to institute future quarantine camps that had some concerning features of the potential for government overreach and control. What are your thoughts about how, say, the Republican Party can better talk to the public about socialism, the potential for overreach of the government, but also affordability at the same time?
Right. Well, this is the problem. The messaging is not getting through to the voters, or at least not to the vast majority of voters. You referenced my lawsuit against Governor Hochul for the quarantine camp regulation. It was absolutely not covered by mainstream media in New York or outside New York. It was something that flew under the radar, and it should not have. Being able to remove people from their home with no proof that you're sick and put you into a detention center for however long the government or the Department of Health wants, with no means for you to regain your freedom unless you hire an attorney and sue your way out, is absolutely unconscionable. And it was not covered by the media, and therefore it flew under the radar. And we see the same thing happening here. Yes, the Republicans have to change their messaging, but they need to do more messaging, and they need to explain to the voters what it means when somebody like Zohran Mamdani says, I'm going to make New York City more affordable. Now, the seize the means of production, those are his words. Those are not my words. He actually said that that's what his plan is to do. He wants to close prisons. Again, his words, not my words. He wants to defund the police. He wants to legalize prostitution. He wants to, raise taxes by $9 billion with a B, billion dollars on the most wealthy New York City dwellers. Those are things that are, number one, not really explained to the majority of voters. What does that mean? That means you are going to see a mass exodus from New York City, which is going to cause the collapse of the economy. I mean, there was a poll that was just released yesterday that said that if Mamdani did win, that almost 1 million New York City residents would flee the city. And those that are planning to flee are the ones are in those top earning tax brackets. If you lose your base, you are going to see a tremendous collapse economically in the city. So these are things that, if we want to understand what's going on or what will go on under the reign of a mayor who, he's a self-proclaimed socialist, but when you look at his policies, they really are more communist than socialist, because he does want the government to control everything. And he even said that in his acceptance speech last night. There are no issues out there that are too small for the government not to deal with. That is absolutely not a capitalist mindset. That is a communist mindset, meaning he wants the government to control and step in any and all situations. And that's very scary, because that will cause the collapse of New York City, which is, the financial center of our nation, if not the world. So this is a really serious situation here. It needs to be better explained to the citizenry. That's for sure, because I don't think that was done properly on this campaign.
Do you have a sense, Mike, that the youth today fully understand socialism, communism, and Marxism?
No, I mean, this panel is showing me that they don't, depending upon whatever age bracket, because again, his words in the mayoral debate, I don't want to defund the police. The current police budget has 33,700 police officers that are allocated for. I don't want to increase that. What I want to do is allocate that funding now to have mental health resources and other professionals go out on calls. Whether or not the calls or the severity and the dispatcher can handle it, we can get into all of that. But at the end of the day, look, if Republicans I worked at Fox News for 2.5 years. I know what talking points look like. I know what buzzwords look like. I know what phraseology looks like, for lack of a better term. I think if Republicans want to get serious, as opposed to labeling him 4 different terms that are conflating all 4 of them, I think what they should do is actually talk about the issue and the direct path line to solve it, and how Zohran is inexperienced to solve it. Cuomo tried to do that. The problem is Cuomo killed New York City residents with his policies, and he had a sexual harassment scandal on top of that. And then Curtis Sliwa, who I actually think the Republicans should have thrown more behind, because he's actually been a fixture in New York City for 45 years, whether or not the hat gives a connotation of he's not a serious candidate. They never actually put something serious into the Republican nominee for the party in New York City. So if the Republican Party wants to change, I would drop the buzzwords and phrases and the conflation of the terms that nobody wants to hear, and actually talk about the issues and give people a direct through line to how we solve those issues. That is the problem with American politics in 2025, because I just said it before. Zohran Mamdani, Andrew Cuomo, Curtis Sliwa, they're not going to make that 540 West 50th apartment come down from $5,700 to what I was paying at $3,300. They're not going to do it. And they're not going to do it because we live in a capitalistic society. Zohran Mamdani's not going to change that. Andrew Cuomo's not going to change that. Teddy Ruxpin, the old teddy bear, is not going to change that. The problem with New York City, and especially the mayor's race, it gets over magnified. Dinkins got hate. Koch on his 3rd term got hate. De Blasio got hate. Giuliani obviously has gotten hate post being America's mayor. Eric Adams was the face of the Democratic Party. Now you couldn't find him on a Democratic milk carton. So New York City's mayor's race gets over amplified, and that's the problem. If we truly want to talk about the issues and the direct through line to solve them, that's where Mamdani gave some clear-cut answers. The grocery store idea as an example, pilot program, 5 different boroughs. This is what we would do, and we would reallocate budget that is already being spent on private grocery stores for that. Whether or not you agree with that, that's fine. But he talked about the policy all the way through. And therein lies the solve. And that's why I think people went to the ballot box for him.
Certainly, people will be watching to see how his promises pan out. And we just have about 30 seconds left. If you would like to give the final remark, Bobby Ann Cox.
Yeah, I think that Mike has some good points there. This is really about, marketing, right? Zohran Mamdani marketed himself and his ideas in such a manner that he appealed to 50% of the voters, and he won. So it was also, I think, the manner in which he did his marketing. He's 34 years old, so he was able to use all of the technology that's modern and hip for the people that are in his age bracket, right? Those 20-year-olds, those 30-year-olds, even some 40-year-olds. He was on TikTok. He was all over social media. Those were things that were lacking, I think, in the Cuomo and also the Curtis Sliwa campaigns. So, if you appeal to your voters and you can reach them more effectively, you have a much bigger shot at winning. So this is really something that was this whole race, this whole mayoral race was really something that came out in the end to show that, it's not just the issues, it's the personality of the candidate and how well they can sell what they're selling to the voters. And, if the issues are not fully explained, as Mike said, if they're not fully explained to the voters and they're just kind of glazed over, I think the Republicans would have done better to give specific examples, or even Cuomo, who was running independently, give specific examples of what Mamdani's New York City would look like if he wins. And I think that was lacking. I think people relate to specific hard examples. What does it mean if you're going to shift the funding within the police department from, the cops on the street keeping you safe and stopping and preventing crimes to, doing a mental health, taking that money and putting it towards mental health experts instead? What does that look like for the everyday New Yorker? Those kinds of examples, I think, would have done a better job at showing that this is really a dangerous type of reign that we're going to see now for the next 4 years at least. We do have term limits in New York City for the mayor, but it's 3 consecutive terms. So, we're really going to have to see how this plays out.
Certainly, and I know President Trump convened his senators this morning, forecast that they would be speaking about and reflecting on the results last night. Both sides, I'm sure, will be reflecting for quite some time to come. Thank you so much, Bobby Ann Cox, Mike Leon. Good to have you both on with us today.
Thanks, Steph.
Yes, thank you.
And President Trump's tariffs were at the top of the Supreme Court's oral arguments scheduled today. The justices prepared the government's Solicitor General with questions about the president's power to impose global tariffs. The Solicitor General explained why they were necessary. Check it out.
On April 2nd, President Trump determined that our exploding trade deficits had brought us to the brink of an economic and national security catastrophe. He further pronounced that the traffic of fentanyl and other opioids into our country has created a public health crisis, taking hundreds of thousands of American lives. President Trump has declared that these emergencies are country-killing and not sustainable, that they threaten the bedrock of our national and economic security, and that fixing them will make America a strong, financially viable, and respected country again.
A handful of small businesses in 12 Democratic states have accused the president of overstepping his authority by imposing global tariffs where the law doesn't allow it. They maintain that only Congress has the power to regulate tariffs.
Tariffs are taxes. They take dollars from Americans' pockets and deposit them in the U.S. Treasury. Our founders gave that taxing power to Congress alone. Yet here, the president bypassed Congress and imposed one of the largest tax increases in our lifetimes. Many doctrines explain why this is illegal, like the presumption that Congress speaks clearly when it imposes taxes and duties, and the major questions doctrine. But it comes down to common sense. It's simply implausible that in enacting IEEPA, Congress handed the president the power to overhaul the entire tariff system and the American economy in the process.
The court is not expected to make a ruling today, but it appears that the justices are concerned about the Trump administration's regulation of tariffs globally, with several justices questioning whether he properly interpreted the statute in question. And a federal judge has ruled that the White House must provide American Sign Language interpretation during press briefings. The decision followed a lawsuit filed in May by the National Association of the Deaf. Plaintiffs alleged that the Trump administration has stopped using ASL interpreters since taking office. A U.S. district judge ruled that the administration's actions likely violated the Rehabilitation Act. The federal law aims to ensure people with disabilities have access to federal activities. The judge said many deaf individuals do not communicate in English. As a result, the judge ruled that English captions and transcripts alone are not enough to make briefings accessible to people who use ASL. He ordered the Trump administration to file a status report by tomorrow. And a state emergency declared in Kentucky after a UPS cargo plane crashed near Louisville Airport. Governor Andy Beshear shared an update.
Continue to search that site, hope and pray for the best, but know there may be more loss of life that we're going to learn about today. 2 businesses were directly impacted: Kentucky Petroleum Recycling and Grade A Auto Parts. Thankfully, a local restaurant that is right there that we had great concern would be impacted and we would lose whoever was in it, was missed and now is helping the search and rescue.
At least 9 people were killed when a UPS cargo plane crashed shortly after takeoff yesterday that left a fiery trail of destruction. Kentucky Governor Andy Beshear said the radius for the shelter-in-place around the crash has been reduced, but people living in the immediate area are being told not to drink the water. Beshear also said he declared a state of emergency to speed up resources for victims. The governor said he expects the death toll to grow by at least 1. He added that authorities searching the site do not expect to find any survivors today. Beshear and the mayor of Louisville plan to tour the crash site. We'll keep you updated on that tragedy. And the ongoing government shutdown back here in the U.S. has broken records, at least 36 days, becoming the longest in history. President Trump is doubling down on calls for Republicans to change a major Senate rule to bypass Democrats and reopen the government with only GOP votes. NTD's Melina Weisskopf reports.
Remember, this is the first time in the history of America that any party has had the audacity to close down the government over a totally clean, nonpartisan continuing resolution.
As the shutdown breaks record for the longest in history, President Trump is pushing for a change in course. At a breakfast meeting this morning with Republican senators, President Trump doubled down on his calls for Republicans to change Senate rules to bypass Democrats on this. He said that yesterday's elections didn't go well for Republicans because of the shutdown and predicts the midterms could go badly for Republicans if nothing changes soon.
It's time for Republicans to do what they have to do, and that's terminate the filibuster. It's the only way you can do it. And if you don't terminate the filibuster, you'll be in bad shape. We won't pass any legislation.
The filibuster is what requires 60 votes for legislation to pass in the Senate, which means that with the current makeup, at least 7 Democrats are needed to pass this short-term funding bill. Now, Republican leaders have previously brushed off Trump's calls to end the filibuster, being concerned about what it would mean if they lose power to Democrats and they're able to pass their agenda easier in the future.
And I'm not going to vote to change it. I don't think Thune will even bring it to the floor. I don't think that's going to necessarily stop the president from asking.
We'll see if Trump's insistent pushing on this front will ultimately change their minds. Now, some Democrats have joined Republicans on this short-term funding bill, but not enough to get it across the finish line.
I still don't know exactly what it is they want. We have accommodated a lot of their questions and concerns. They want to have a discussion about health care. We offered that up a long time ago.
Now, there are bipartisan talks underway among a small group of rank-and-file senators, but no leaders involved. It's unclear at this point if that will make a difference. Democrat leader Schumer wouldn't say where he stands on these backdoor negotiations. Open the government.
Look, as I said, we had a great caucus. We discussed all of the options. Thank you.
Now, some lawmakers are predicting the shutdown could come to an end by this week, especially since the election is over now. Senator Mullen saying Democrats have told him they got the green light to vote with Republicans on this after yesterday's elections. Listen.
Schumer told Dick Durbin that, listen, after the election, we'll let you guys go, let you vote on how you want to vote, and open the government back up.
Pretty soon, lawmakers will have to look at a new bill to extend government funding even further than the November 21st deadline, but it's unclear at this point if anything in that new bill will be different beyond the extended timeline. Reporting from Washington, D.C., Melina Weisskopf, NTD News.
And as mayor-elect Zohran Mamdani prepares to take his seat in City Hall, his opponents are warning about his socialist policies, with Curtis Sliwa saying the movement is not over yet. Our Washington correspondent Luis Eduardo Martinez was at Cuomo's watch party. He joins us now. Luis, welcome. Tell us what caught your eye in the election yesterday.
Well, yesterday, as you just mentioned, I was at the Cuomo watch party, and I thought it was interesting because I was expecting to be talking to Democrats who were at least on the anti-socialist platform, that they were supporting Andrew Cuomo running as an independent, but didn't want to vote for Mamdani, who was actually the Democratic candidate. But I ran into a lot of Republicans, which I thought was interesting. It was unexpected because I was doing my rounds, interviewing people to get sound bites for yesterday's special coverage. And, you know, person after person, there were Republicans that were there. Yesterday I spoke to one specifically, a Katie Flagler from a German-American citizen living in New York City, voted for Trump and was now a campaign volunteer for Cuomo, which to me was like, that doesn't add up. Let's listen to what she had to say yesterday about this.
The other candidate, like Zohran Mamdani, I think he's dangerous. We don't know what he's going to do to the city. And that made me and also my friends who are like huge Trump supporters all like to decide to support Andrew Cuomo in this election because it's not about parties.
So, Stefania, of course, interesting to see the results. Zohran Mamdani won by 9 points. But again, like this coalition that Andrew Cuomo put together of independents, moderate Democrats, Republicans, and even if you think of, you know, next year's elections, maybe if that Republican candidate wasn't on the ticket, that gap in between those who did support the new mayor-elect and obviously policies that are completely different from what the Democratic Party has been pushing thus far, it would suggest that Democrats did not necessarily learn something from this election on which way to go, whether they should go with the more radical progressive policies of Zohran Mamdani or stay with moderate policies like the ones Andrew Cuomo was proposing, or Spanberger, or of course Mikey Sherrill in the other two gubernatorial elections. So my key takeaway, interesting coalitions that Mamdani created against him, and that Democrats still don't know which path to choose for next year's midterm elections.
Right, and which starts today, as many are saying. Many are looking ahead at how they may need to shift their strategies. Do you have a sense that the Democratic Party may lean more into Mamdani's kind of approach, or how the Republicans may shift? We saw President Trump gathering his senators today to discuss how they could reflect on the elections. What's your thoughts about what both sides might glean from
I think we were all expecting to get an either-or answer, and if you add the California ballot to the mix, which that would push towards more progressive politics, more radical politics of actually going and redistricting to gain more seats. The Democratic Party, I don't think, got a clear North Star of where to go. But it is also interesting the fact that fear politics is still very much important in American politics. I spoke yesterday to a Jewish American living in New York City, and he was very concerned about Zohran Mamdani being elected the first Muslim American mayor of the city, and particularly his socialist policies. So maybe we are moving away from the culture wars, and maybe we're moving away from the opposition to woke politics if we're talking about what the Republican Party is doing. But Zohran Mamdani is definitely becoming a new target and will have a lot of spotlight on him and what his policies do to the largest city in the U.S. Let's listen to Josh Friedman, who I spoke to yesterday during the Cuomo campaign watch party.
As a Jew in New York City, realizing that Zohran Mamdani, he doesn't like us. And he is someone who is, call him a wolf wearing a sheep's mask, and he's out to get us by slogans, by words, and he's fooling all the people who are in New York City that are uneducated.
So we don't know necessarily what the Democratic Party will learn from these elections. We do know that, and we already saw that from President Trump during his Truth Socials in the past month, that at least with the victory of Zohran Mamdani, there is a new boogeyman. There's a new example of what to reject and what to propose if you're thinking of being a Republican candidate in the midterms 2026. One of the things that you might not want to be proposing is radical left, progressive and socialist policies. And lastly, I think affordability. I think affordability is the greatest subject that Republicans and Democrats have honed in, moved away from necessarily immigration or cultural wars, and realized that the American people are much more interested right now in affordability and kitchen table topics than all of these other maybe distractions to national politics.
Certainly, and the filibuster making headlines as well. Again today, President Trump pressing forward for that. Really, we'll be looking to see whether that impacts people's opinions on the way the government is run, but also on the policies going forward. Do you have a sense of any momentum around the government shutdown? Now that the elections are over, some of the experts we spoke to this morning were saying, oh, perhaps Democrats will relent now that maybe the shutdown was partly a strategy to help win some of those elections, and maybe they'll let go here.
I personally thought that one of the reasons they wanted to get to November 5th was not only because it's the day after the elections, and then that was already it fulfilled its objective of mobilizing the base for the Democratic Party to vote in an off-year election, but also because now the record has been broken, and now Democrats can go forward and say that the two longest shutdowns in American history happened during a Trump administration. I do think there's momentum growing for the shutdown to end. It's not going to end today or tomorrow, but surely I would suspect that within the next week. We just heard from a Senator Molina's reporting that some Democratic senators have already received the instruction or the go-ahead to go and vote for opening the government shutdown. Let's remember, we don't need, or the government doesn't need all 47 Democrats to vote to open the government. It's just 5 more, aside from, of course, Senator Angus King, Cortez Masto, and John Fetterman. So that would definitely also be an important relief for the American people. There's 42 million people counting on SNAP benefits, and of course the close to 1 million federal workers who are furloughed, not receiving a paycheck. And of course, worst off, those who are actually working still and not receiving a paycheck. And I don't think either party wants to get to Thanksgiving, to that holiday season where everyone's going to want to be traveling and have to go through all these long lines, and also the dangers of maybe overcrowded airspace with air traffic controllers who are worn out of working without pay.
That's it, not to mention all the safety issues that have been coming up. But you've been in D.C. for all this time until you just came here for the reporting. But what's the feel like on the ground there? Around the lawmakers, the tension must be building.
It's interesting. Like my impression has been that this government shutdown, as opposed to others where you'd see lawmakers grinding day in and day out, trying to negotiate a solution, it seemed that both parties already knew what was going to happen and how they were going to manage this government shutdown. Republicans were not going to relent, and Democrats wanted to make the point that this was about a healthcare crisis and drag it on at least until the election, to mobilize those peoples to the voting booths. We'll see if that was what was pre-planned, because we didn't see much of that grinding of negotiating. It's only, I think, this week that we've started seeing some Democrats and Republicans sitting down together and discussing a way out, and that's a month out of the beginning of this government shutdown. And then the other big thing, Stefania, is that they opened the government with the continuing resolution that the House already passed. That continuing resolution expires on November 21st. So that means that we would see another government shutdown on November 21st if something else doesn't happen. So we'll either see an extension of that continuing resolution, maybe for a few months, and then we'll have the exact same funding battle in a few months, or an entire year-long continuing resolution, which would mean that, again, Congress, for like the 30th year in a row, will not do its proper appropriations process. So then we have right now the Supreme Court deciding whether or not the president has the power of tariffs or not, but Congress, who allegedly is the one who has the power of the purse, hasn't been doing their job and actually being able to determine through debate and through legislation how government should spend its money.
So much to watch here. Thank you so much for coming in and giving us your report, Luis Eduardo Martinez.
Thank you, Stefania.
The discovery of childlike explicit dolls on Shein's website on Saturday fueled an outcry. Shein said it had sanctioned the sellers and implemented a full ban on explicit dolls. Chinese fast fashion giant Shein opens its first permanent store in Paris today, sparking strong opposition from French designers, lawmakers, and store owners. Some experts say Shein is using its partnership with a French store as a stepping stone for its global expansion strategy. NTD international correspondent David Vivaz reports from Paris.
The opening of spaces dedicated to Shein in the BHV store is taking France's fashion world by storm. The Chinese brand accused of supporting pedocriminality on Monday after authorities found childlike sex dolls for sale on its platform is also facing backlash from fashion labels. Around a dozen French brands present at the BHV said they would leave the store in protest over Shein's arrival. The government also withdrawn its funding from the society managing the BHV. A small group of protesters, including fashion designers, gathered outside the BHV department store in central Paris on Wednesday. Demonstrators held signs reading "Shame on Shein," denouncing what they called the company's unethical business practices. For Fashion Association Vice President Céline Dupuis, this might change the face of the fashion world.
It's a major shift. Shein started online, and now it's moving into the heart of Paris, right across from City Hall. To me, it's a threat to democracy. Their approach is aggressive, manipulative on social media, and toxic, both in how they sell clothes and how they push people into overconsumption.
Shein stands for everything we don't like in terms of textile composition, manufacturing, and distribution. Its products, how to say it. They're poor quality, certainly cheap, but they won't last. My generation and that of my grandmothers prefer a quality item that would last over time. These are my values, what I created my brand on.
The partnership between BHV and Shein comes as BHV faces significant financial losses, according to its management company. This includes months-long delays in paying salaries to some employees.
I spoke with BHV workers yesterday. They are all very worried about their jobs, since Mr. Merlin, the current owner of the store, has stopped paying the brands that have been established for 6 months. So it's very dangerous for the security of the people who work at BHV and for the brands. I would like to add that this is one country that created fashion to begin with. We must speak out against this Shein presence in stores because we don't hold the same values as they do. Remember, childlike sex dolls have been found on the Chinese website, and now we found that we can also order bladed weapons too.
The BHV is now at the center of a backlash spanning politics, fashion brands, and store owners. The Federation of Paris Grand Stores has voted unanimously to exclude BHV after its partnership with Shein. Shein pop-up spaces are expected to open stores later this year in 5 other French cities. David Vives, NTD News, Paris.
Amid the controversy, Shein told CNN that its adult products category has been removed entirely while a review of its screening procedures is carried out. And France's Prime Minister today suspended access to Shein's online platform in France until the company proves that its content complies with French law. France's Minister of Trade addressed Parliament today over another serious finding, the sale of weapons by Shein, including one that was recovered in a murder investigation.
Écoutez, c'en est trop. Too much is too much. After the sex doll scandal, now the weapons. I've been talking to Minister of Interior, and we found out that a weapon used to kill a 14-year-old boy named Elias in Paris on January this year was purchased via Shein.
The trade minister said the case of Shein would be closely investigated by France's administration.